it's Russ and sailing vessel Tautog. Current location is still Marathon, Florida, at a mooring ball in Boot Key Harbor. The weather conditions are difficult, hot, humid, not a lot of air moving. Although we're getting a cold front on Sunday, and we should have some pretty decent cooler weather next week with more steady winds. And so if that's the case, I'll take the boat out, because right now the winds are so fickle, trying to sail even to the Sombrero Reef Lighthouse would be nearly impossible. So let's talk about projects I'm going to be doing here on the boat. And I'll give you a little bit of context and a bigger picture here. We came to Marathon to spend the winter, basically. Because Florida gets cold up there in Jacksonville. I almost froze to death up there, and I am not ready yet to depart for my big voyage and start crossing oceans, because my girlfriend won't have her visa now until probably early December. We thought we'd have the visa by frickin' June, but delay, whatever. I'm not going to worry about bitching about why that happened, but the reality is she's still not here, and she won't be able to go with me, and I have to stay inside the USA or a U.S. territory for the foreseeable future until she gets her visa and then residency card. So that's the context. So if I'm going to be sitting here in Marathon for the next couple of weeks or a couple of months, one might ask, well, what should I be doing with my time? And on the old laptop here, I've got a spreadsheet like a lot of people do, making a list of all the deficiencies, and I'm going to just read you some of the highlights here and the things that I'm thinking of tackling, and then we'll talk about each of the jobs in detail. And we'll start with cockpit drains, okay? The cockpit drains, oh my God, I've got an issue with the cockpit drains because the lower cockpit drains, the drain valves go out through the bottom of the boat through a seacock valve, and the seacock valve itself is mounted on a wooden backing plate, and that wooden backing plate is decomposing. So that's the deal, and fundamentally I consider that a large vulnerability for me, and I'm worried about it. One of the potential solutions, which I'd like your opinion on, is I've got a little brainchild up here telling me to just redesign the whole damn thing, and we'll talk about that when we get to the details. Okay, category engine. Well, there are some engine hoses that have not been replaced ever by me. I replaced some when I first bought the boat, and I need to replace more. That's one big part, hose replacement, and this includes the hoses for the fuel tank, the vent hose and the fill hose. They definitely need to be replaced. We'll talk about that detail. And you may not realize that I've never ever had functioning engine instrumentation. You know, the water temperature, the oil pressure, the tachometer, none of that works. And I was actually thinking that might be a perfect job to tackle while I'm here in Marathon. We'll get to that. Okay, and another one is interior work, and we'll talk about that first. We'll start with that one because it's easy, it's non-consequential. I mean, if I screw it up, so what? It's just shelving and stuff like that, but it's good, busy work to keep me going while I'm thinking about the other jobs. So, let's start with the different projects, starting with the interior shelving work. And when I introduce each project, if I don't say the basis for the project, like why it's a problem in the first place, then I expect to be challenged by my teammates on the YouTube here, because I can be one of those guys who gets fixated with some problem that's not really a problem, and cockpit drains might be one of them. But with that, let's get started. Problem number one is the interior shelving. Let's go. Okay, so problem number one that I'm looking at working on is this area here in the cabin, the main bulkhead. I'll call it shelving, the shelving unit. So part of the problem is that the storage itself is useless. Okay, that's part of it. Part of it also is the fact that this shelf in here is badly damaged by water, and I don't like having that nasty old stuff like that. It's damaged because for years that chain plate has been leaking, and if you look closely, it's hard to see, there's a lot of globs of silicone. I mean, honestly, it looks like one entire tube of silicone was spent trying to prevent water from coming down in here. And all that really does is trap water on the shelf on the top, and it damaged that one as well. So there's water damage under this shelf, right by the chain plate. There's water damage under the chain plate. And there's some kind of water damage behind these screw holes because this teak border, or the guard, is no longer secured in the center. None of these screws are even installed anymore. They're not grabbing anything. So, oh my God. So what am I thinking of doing? I would like to completely remove this entire bulkhead and the shelves. I would like to retain the top shelf exactly as it is in exactly the same location. And that's all there is to the project. Remove it, and then the theory is that when I have all this stuff removed and this shelf removed and scrapped, any salvageable parts salvaged and saved, then I'm going to have a big open space all the way to the hull, which will be cleaned and painted like the other portions are. And then we'll get new cushions made that go all the way to the edge. And while I'm at it, I'm going to install the teak strips that go horizontally up against the bulkhead, and they have to be offset, kind of like that. I want to create an outboard just like that area above the bunk, okay? Which means I'm going to have to purchase a large number of teak strips, which will be quite expensive, and I'm not quite sure how or where I'm going to source that here in Marathon. So here's some other details I'll tell you about. What if I have the table folded down and we're trying to eat dinner here, and now you don't have a seat back? Well, that can be very uncomfortable. So the plan, part of the design, is going to include putting a rack to hold a vertical piece that can be used as a seat back, just like this. In fact, this piece I just have my hand on, that's exactly the piece that's going to go over there. That's its eventual function, is to get moved from here to over there. And I would have a rack to store it right here, so if you're at sea and you're sleeping underway and the boat's really rolling, you could put the lee board, basically is what it is, and pick it up and put it over here to keep the person in the bunk. So it's going to kind of be a multifunctional seating area. It could be a bed, it could be a sofa, and it could be, you know, seating for dinner, and it can be an underway bed as well. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's job number one. The argument against doing this job is that it doesn't make the boat faster or safer or stronger or anything like that. The argument for doing it is that it's easy, it's borderline free. I can do almost all of it with existing tools and equipment and supplies. And it's good busy work for me to do while I'm thinking of some of the other jobs. So that's why I'm going to tackle this job. Project number 2. Numero dos, cockpit drains. Man, I've been talking about these a long darn time. And let's take a look at what we got. Okay, so on the heading of upper cockpit drains, that drain there and the same one on the starboard side, they drain via a 1.5 inch hose, and they drain under here through the engine compartment all the way to the transom. And both of them join together and come out one hole in the transom. This hose here is the valve, or the hose in question, and it goes all the way back there. I think we should get a light. And it goes all the way to the back. This is the hose right above my leg here. That's the same hose from the starboard side, and they both go all the way back out the transom of the boat. So now you're supposed to challenge me and say, well, what's the problem? There really is no problem with those, except in my little dreamland, I would love to have a way to collect rainwater when I cruise. So this would be under the heading of an improvement opportunity, because it's not really a design deficiency. You know, nobody's being hurt by this. There's no safety issue. But when it rains, normally I won't have a sun cover on the boat, and all the water that hits the deck is going to roll to the edges, comes down here and drains out these right out the back of the boat, and it is pouring out that hose, that fitting at the back, when it's really raining heavily. And all of that is water that could be easily retained if this was redesigned. So imagine, if you will, I replumbed this and had a hose going straight down like it does now, but there's a series of valves. I could have a shut-off valve or a three-way valve, either way, so that I could direct the water inside the boat, probably in the cabin down there, so I could fill buckets and buckets and buckets of water with rainwater and then send the water overboard. Okay, and as part of that, I could eliminate these big hoses, and I could just take these these drains, and send them straight down and straight over the side of the boat, about 6 to 8 inches above the water line, and that's where the scupper would be. It would just be a drain valve going right out the side of the boat. So that, I think, is a proposed job that might deserve some scrutiny, because it's a lot of work, and you're cutting 2 new holes in the boat to run these drains out the side of the boat, and is it worth it? That's the question. And okay, so now let's talk about the lower cockpit drains. Okay, we got the engine compartment open again. In the cockpit, I have a cockpit drain here, and one each in the back corners. So in the 4 corners of the cockpit have holes, 1.5 inch piping as well, and they both drain. These guys drain, they go down and they hang a right, well, this way, and they go to this, they join that pipe, and then they come out the bottom, and we'll jump on in here and take a look. So these, all 6 holes go to the same places. Okay, now I'm sitting on top of the engine. So this cockpit drain and this cockpit drain are connected, and they both come out this hose here, and they run out and they go through the seacock down at the bottom of the boat, and that's how they exit. Now the corner drain here, that is run to this hose right here, and the hoses themselves appear to be in very good condition, and even though there's a lot of sealant and junk on these fittings, nothing here appears to be archaic and really old, so I'm not really worried officially. But you can see these are all a common drain, and they all run through the overboard valve. And back here, this hose is coming from the back quarter of the cockpit drain. You can see where the hose turns and runs uphill. Okay, and along this hose, about halfway down, you can see a non-return fitting, which I'm going to try to get closer. Yeah, I think I got it. Yeah, that's the non-return fitting. A check valve, basically. Okay, so the problem is these valves themselves. They do work just fine. I mean, I can rotate these valves, okay, and I can open them and I can shut them. They're normally in the open position because you have to have them open to remove rainwater. If I was in a boatyard, I would still have to leave them open. If you knew there was never going to be any rain, I guess you could close them. But the problem is these valves are bedded on top of an old piece of plywood, which is at the end of service life. I mean, look at it. It's just, and that's what I'm nervous about. I'm nervous about what happens when this piece of plywood is just, which is like paper or soft cardboard now, when it's completely gone. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to sink my boat? So the question about will this sink my boat? Probably not, because I remember removing old hull fittings from this boat, and even if there was absolutely no plywood at all, I'm quite sure that nothing's going to leak and the valve's not going to fall out. These babies are installed with the record amount of sealant, and they were very difficult to get the skin fitting side of this valve off. It would be murder. They're separately bolted in place as well, so I don't think it's going anywhere. One possible option I have is I could just take my utility tool. I have an oscillating tool called a multi-tool, and I could just kind of cut very quickly and follow the circle of the base of the valve, and then take a syringe and inject epoxy and just kind of make permanent that nasty ass piece of plywood until I can get to a boatyard. On the port side, correction, on the starboard side, the base plate is in much better condition. See? And that's the way it was supposed to look and supposed to remain looking. So now let's talk about, well, what would I do? So if I want to combine the jobs, the cockpit drains. In a perfect world, I will not have these seacocks in the boat at all. Knowing that I have a fitting in the transom that is above the water line, very close to center line, for the upper cockpit drains, if I'm going to replumb the upper cockpit drains and send the water directly over the side of the boat or to a collection facility inside the boat, then I don't need that fitting in the transom. And so that's my little brain is thinking, if I'm not going to use the fitting on the transom, then maybe I could reroute the lower cockpit drains. Instead of running the drains from up here and sending them out the seacock, then why not just send them from here directly all the way out the back of the boat, the same way that that hose is going right now? Why not? And that's the question. In a perfect world, I'm imagining an area in here without any seacock, with these valves gone, with the area fiberglassed over, and now I have storage space. Hell, I could install a permanent generator that runs off the diesel tank, because all of this stuff would be gone except for this going straight out the back. And that, I think, is a very reasonable proposition that I am not going to start in the next day or two, so there's plenty of time for me to solicit feedback from the smart people who watch this channel. My gosh, it's hot today. Gray, but it sure seems to be hot. So the question is, what kind of problems could I be introducing if I proceeded down this path? And yeah, so sometimes the person closest to the problem is the person who is least qualified to actually propose a solution. And I've just been thinking about this for quite a while, though. So here's something you might want to know as part of this. You see the blue masking tape on the vertical run of the hose there? That's approximately the water line outside the boat. So these drains are only about a foot, maybe 11 inches above the water line. And the question is that even relevant to this conversation? And I'm just thinking about that. So at a high level, guys, there's some hoses on this system that need to be replaced. So at a minimum, the hoses on the starboard side, you can see that hose is not looking so good. It's got cracks in it where the steel wire is. So this hose from here to here absolutely has to be replaced. Trying to go after the ones going aft, that's necessary as well. And I can shut the valve and I'll have a little bit of leakage, but not a lot. But if I shut that valve and I break that fitting where the hose clamps are, right there, water's going to be coming out, and it'll be a boat flooding event. So the smart play might be to do nothing until I'm hauled out again. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. And one other thing to mention is that physical access to the bottom side of those fittings is quite difficult. Now you see that there's a bulkhead, like a white plywood bulkhead, and now this hose is actually hanging on it, but that's removable. If I completely empty this cockpit locker and the same one on this side, and I get all the stuff out, I can remove that bulkhead fairly quickly, less than an hour. If then I can have much better access to all the valving and hosing and stuff like that. So that would probably be part of this job schedule. Yeah, now let's get to engine. Engine instrumentation. Okay, I guess there's not much to say. This is the instrumentation panel, and I can tell you that none of it works. None of it. I don't even think the hour meter is going. I don't care too much about an hour meter. I don't care about the voltmeter. All I would really care about is oil pressure and water temperature and a tachometer. And I think it would be fairly easy to find a group out there that could sell me 3 instruments plus the sender units. Give me, and I would probably need a little bit of education on how to correctly install them. Yeah, I'm getting hot now. Okay, but there's one thing more. So, I think you all understand replacing hoses, but the hoses in this case are little need a picture, I think. Now we're looking at hoses. The fuel tank is on the other side of this bulkhead below the deck. And these two hoses, this guy and this guy, those are the fuel supply and return. One goes to the rake horse to send fuel to the engine, and one takes the diesel fuel return from the injector system back to the tank. I think most of the people watching the channel understand that. These two hoses are the ones in question. And I'm prepared to replace all of them, I'll tell you that. But this is the fill hose that comes from the deck level fill connection, and it's, as far as I know, original equipment. And I want to replace it just because that's the vent hose, and that is also, as far as I know, original. But that's not really the problem. The problem is from the view of the fill hose to the tank, and as you can see, but I think this job is going to turn into a real wrestling match. I mean, the physical access is not awful compared to other people on boats. I mean, I think lots and lots of boat owners would say, dude, you've got a pretty good situation. At least you can see it. It's clean, you know, all that stuff. But I think it'll turn into a real wrestling match. And while I'm doing this wrestling match, I might not have my engine available, because if I have to, in order to make the connection to separate the hoses from the tank and make the new connection, I'll probably have to remove the supply and return hoses, and that's going to disable my diesel. And the question is that a good idea during hurricane season? I mean, the season's not over yet, and you just never know when you might have to fire up an engine and get the hell out of here. And if you've got your hoses all disconnected and you're stuck in the middle of some wrestling match and you can't get the new hoses on correctly, or you can't bleed the system, now you've really screwed yourself. And hiring somebody doesn't necessarily solve the problem unless they're the world's expert, you know, in hose replacement. You know, and there are people like that who do this all the time, and they know more tricks than I might know. So that's a job I am planning on going after. As soon as I can figure out where to buy the hose and buy a few meters of the big hose and a lot of the smaller hose, then I'm going to go after this job. Okay. And I'll show you one part more. I'll show you the top of the tank connection. Hang on. Okay, just going to the fuel tank here. Okay, so that's not good. Okay, so this is the top of the fuel tank, and these are the supply and return hoses that we talked about, and that's the vent. And the fill hose, I'm getting really hot, sweaty now, guys, and that's the fill hose connection down there. So my concern is, I mean, dealing with these connections here, I think, is not so awful. And probably, by other boat standards, this is very good access, but I'm going to have to remove all three of these, I think, to get after that. And when I remove the supply and the return, that means my diesel won't work for the duration. So, that is why. So, thinking through jobs like that, oh my God, am I sweaty? Yeah, so thinking through jobs like that, you know, how to do the fuel hose replacement, what to do with cockpit drains, that's why it's probably not a bad idea for me to start with interior cabinetry. So we're back to the search job. This job I'm going to go ahead and start tomorrow. I'm going to just start by unscrewing. There's like 1 million wood screw fittings that hold this thing together. I was hopeful that there was a way I could retain these tracks in these little plastic doors that go in these tracks, because that's what it was, one of those type of doors. But I don't, experience has told me that these things are not going to come off without destructive means. So, and I'll start that tomorrow. I'll disassemble everything I can. I'll disassemble everything that can be done with by unscrewing it. And then we're going to go after this. I'm tired of looking at it, and I really want to get proper cushions made just once in my life. You know, finish the job all the way. Okay, so I'm going to close this video out, guys. This is going to be a quickie. Okay, so I'm done sweating for now. I'm going to go ashore and fill my. I've got a jerry can of gasoline I need to get. And I'm going to go to the public library and try to see if they have books, because I can read, actually, and I thought I would read a little bit. But we'll get this video put together, and I really, really, in this case, look forward to your comments. So let me have it, baby. All right, bye-bye.